Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ministry of Propaganda. Me and Chris are going to be talking about a couple of different stories tonight. Kissinger, Musk, Israel, Gaza war, and a couple other things. We're going to start with this story regarding Venezuela. So, Chris, tell us what it's about.
Yeah, so this has been an interesting one that I think has sort of slid under the radar for a lot of people, but it's very relevant and is going to potentially make quite a lot of waves in Latin America. So if we just pull this map up, so this territory, this country called Guyana, formerly British Guyana, as it was a British colony. So when it was first founded as a British colony, there was no west boundary set. They only set this eastern boundary. So this line was quite arbitrarily drawn, and Venezuela have always disputed it since the 1900s. In the 50s, I believe, a large gold reserve was found in this territory of Essequibo, which is a fantastic word. I love saying that. Essequibo. So that obviously excited claims even more. And then in the 2010s, a large oil reserve was found. So obviously, Guyana is a place that not many people ever think of. It's got a population of less than 1 million people. In Essequibo, completely like the most famous place, the only place of reference that I could even recognize was the former. I'm not sure what you'd call it. Commune of Jonestown, where Jim Jones and his cultists killed themselves. That was in Essequibo. So basically, what's happened now is Venezuela on Sunday went to the polls for a referendum, and it was 5 questions. Most of the questions were: do you agree to discard UN resolution taking this territory away from us? And the last one: do you agree to reincorporate this territory of Essequibo, which is 2/3 of the country, as a Venezuelan state? Which, of course, would give, obviously, the citizens there Venezuelan citizenship, but would give Venezuela rights to this oil reserve. At the moment, since this oil has been found, Guyana is now it has the 4th largest reserves of oil in the world, which is massive, and is now at the moment sitting in the top 20 oil distributors in the world. So an up and coming economy. Now, what's rattled Venezuela is the contracts that have been leased out by Guyana include ExxonMobil. So when you've got a country that, like Venezuela, that its main export is oil, that is so heavily sanctioned, you can understand why it's really annoyed them to have their neighbour invite American oil companies to exploit the resources and undermine them. So it's going to be interesting to see what's happening. Now, obviously, they don't have a military. It does sound from this referendum that this is asking the citizens permission to annex territory. It does look like that may happen. As it's happened now with Lula in the presidency in Brazil, that's changed the sort of dynamic, because he's obviously he's much more balanced towards Venezuela than, say, Bolsonaro was. Sorry, my cat. So it doesn't look like there's going to be much sort of support there. But unfortunately, an American general was speaking about it last week and used the dreaded words that Guyana is a important democratic partner, which should be words that should just send the shudders down Maduro's spine. So it is interesting to see what will happen here. If Venezuela do it, then there's not very much Guyana on their own will be able to do to say no or to resist. But obviously, we don't want America turning this into a flashpoint so they can fight back.
Was this ever part of Gran Bolivia with Simon Bolivar and this kind of stuff? Was it ever sort of a part of something that was historically Venezuela and then it was taken by the British? I mean,
very well, maybe, because this Guyana was part of Gran Bolivar.
Gran Bolivar, sorry, that's the one. Yeah.
But obviously, that territory in itself only lasted a couple of years, and it sort of changed in its territorial boundaries quite often.
Mm,
I don't know if that's the historic reference they're using or whether it is much newer.
mm,
I think
mm,
it
mm.
is more the fact that nobody ever said where Venezuela ends and Guyana begins.
Right. Yeah. Right. And the UN had a resolution on this, so they're sort of kind of choosing to reject this or overturn this resolution. Their acceptance of the resolution, is that correct? To my
Yeah,
understanding.
so originally it was the League of Nations that passed a resolution, and then it was reinforced again in the 60s as the UN.
Okay.
Originally, obviously, the resolution was between Venezuela and British Guyana, but obviously, when it was no longer British Guyana, Guyana itself, Guyana proper, took over the sort of responsibility of the British position,
Mm,
and I've argued it since.
mm,
I think at one point Venezuela did sort of concede in the 60s. That may be under one of numerous of their sort of right-wing pro-American dictatorships. That
mm.
it doesn't mean anything, does it? The way the media are sort of portraying it is saying that, oh, Venezuela agreed at one point. It's like, well, just because one dictator at one point said that they agreed doesn't mean that the Venezuelan people agreed.
Yes. 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 Do you reckon the Venezuelans will enter the territory? Will invade, if you want to use that word?
I think there's a good chance of it. I think at the moment, with the way the sort of global climate is, it does seem to be a time of trying your luck with
Mm,
territorial claims, doesn't it? Um,
mm, mm,
Now is the time to do it. America is stretched thin. They've spent so much resource in Ukraine. They're now sending
mm,
so much to spending more with Israel.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, and I mean
So
also the
it's hard to blame Venezuela to think now would be the time to sort of settle old scores while America's stretched so thin. I wouldn't be surprised if this is completely the time for the North to invade South Korea and China to snatch Taiwan and everyone to just get what you want while America's busy.
finish all the scraps and finish and settle scores. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean, I know that the war in Ukraine has actually made things easier for Venezuela. So because of the impact on the oil market, global oil market,
Yes.
there was some
And
easing of restrictions. Yeah, for the
I
Venezuelans.
think that's something as well that is looking like in favor of America not interfering if it
Mm,
does come to that, because
mm,
America have started to loosen sanctions on Venezuela.
mm,
They've obviously had to say it's with the condition that you prepare for elections next year. So they're American PR acting like it's a tit for tat. You start moving, acting like you're moving towards liberal democracy and will unrestrict your oil a little bit
mm,
more.
mm,
But
mm,
really, it's because America are panicking
mm.
because they're struggling to get oil.
Right, right. I mean, if conflict did break out as well, I think this would be, yeah. I mean, that would we'd have the somewhat of a war, civil war in Sudan, potentially a war here, and depending on if this actually got that bad. I don't know. You said there's only 1 million people, so I don't know if there would actually be any major resistance or
Yeah,
not. Um,
800,000 people. So very
yeah,
small. I doubt
and
out of that they've got very much of a standing army at all.
I imagine it's extremely rural or forested and jungle and whatnot. Yeah, so
Yeah,
who knows even if there would be any fighting at all? Just maybe
but
just
with that much wealth, that
yeah.
much oil can buy a lot of friends.
True,
Um,
true.
so it's a risk, isn't it? If America say, okay, well, if Venezuela did take that territory, it wouldn't be so bad because we're loosening sanctions, so we could still buy some of it. We're just
Right.
buying it from the Venezuelan state rather than ExxonMobil.
Yeah, and like you said at the beginning, it is actually more, I think, of a concern for Brazil. How does Brazil navigate this? Do they support them? Do they stop them? Do they send in troops to support the Guyanans? It's kind of
Yeah,
actually more of a hot potato for Lula than it is for Washington. Actually, I think.
yeah. They Brazil have mobilized troops towards the border, but that's obviously just the smart
Kind of
move of
reaction.
reinforcing your own border if the
Yeah,
conflict, because even if you're not getting involved, you don't want any spillover from either side.
sure. Yeah, and
And
also
of
that could
course,
be ratcheting up, diplomatic posturing and whatnot. Yeah.
yeah, and of course,
So
with
this,
it only being less than 1 million people, there still is the chance of small scale sort of refugee crisis. I can't imagine very big because I can't imagine the fighting would be quite intense. Like it's not as if you're going to see Venezuela uh, but battering cities with artillery, like what we've seen in Europe and the Middle East, mainly because I don't think Venezuela are quite capable of it.
Well, I mean, more 2 million people in Gaza seem to be causing a lot of trouble for Israel. So 1 million people in Guyana might be able to do something. Yeah. All right, cool. Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah.
Sure. So I've just got a small one we'll just bring up just for fun because it's kind of just a bit of a filler one, a buffer one here. This is from the UK. So this is regarding the royal family. And a few years ago, obviously, Harry and Meghan Markle got married and had a child, Archie. And it came out in controversies that one of the royal families had questioned or had been concerned, or a number of the royals had been questioned or concerned about what color his skin, the child's skin, Archie's skin, would be. And this caused a lot of controversy because this is very backward kind of thinking. This is not the kind of royal family that should be in the 21st century, if there should be a royal family. But now it came out that it was Kate Middleton and King Charles who were the ones asking and concerned that he might be too brown or too dark. The reason this came out, though, is because a Dutch version of a book called Endgame, Inside the Royal Family and the Monarchy's Fight for Survival, that one had the omission in it. So the English version of the book didn't have it, and other versions of the book didn't have it. But this version of the book in Dutch, which was on the shelves, had it, and they had to pull it off the shelf as quick as possible. So I've actually not seen much of this outside of the article that I read. I can't even remember where I found this originally, but it's a story as you'd expect in the US or the UK, which particularly in the UK, they're trying to keep under wraps. The royal family, that is, particularly trying to stop this from spreading. The masters of PR. But there you go. Now we know who it was. It was none other than the king. So it wasn't some back end sort of plum mouth, inbred freak from the other back end of the royal family. It was the king. Although you could say maybe they're all like that. But yeah. Any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, if I was to bet, I would have personally put my money on it being Charles in the first place, to be honest. I'm quite surprised that it was Kate because I don't really see her as much of a talker in general.
Yeah, no, she's not really royal. I mean, she's married in, right? So she's common. So she was the one who said it. One of the two, at least. Yeah, but
it'd be interesting to see if there's any sort of blowback.
I had my money on Andrew.
Well, that's it. If it was Andrew, I would have thought that they would have been able to just say it ages ago.
True.
It's like, Andy's a racist.
Actually, they should have just used him for that. You'd be like, Andrew, you've got one purpose. You've got one way to serve for the crown now. We're just going to, everything bad, be like, it was Andrew. Who else did it? It was Andrew. Even 5-10 years from now, blame him forever.
I'm just saying this, and we'll let you wear a uniform on Sundays.
There we go. Exactly. At private parties where no one can see you. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see if there is any sort of blowback from this, because obviously the British media is ridiculously pro-royal to the point that there's really no dissenting voice on mainstream media, even on channels where you do get a vary of sort of opinion. Like, just to use an example where you wouldn't expect it, like Talk TV, like Piers Morgan, we've said this recently, he's been really good on the Palestine-Israel conflict, not himself, but on the fact that the guests that he's letting in, even though we'll argue with them, like I've seen people like Loki on his channel, like people that would never be allowed to say their opinion on mainstream TV, but Piers Morgan is allowing them, which give credit to. But even him, like you get, I have seen a few anti-royals in there, but nothing. No real Republican voices at all, but there isn't really that sort of movement in this country yet.
No, I agree. I mean, I think Harry Potter's a royalist, a Republican. Sorry, the old Daniel, what's his name, Harry Potter actor. He's apparently a Republican, but apart from that, I don't know any other prominent Republicans. Yeah. Okay, well, that was just a short one there. I don't know if you want to go into your next story.
Yeah. So next thing that we've got here. So North Korea have launched a spy satellite. So this is the third attempt this year. The first two blew up, and the third one successfully launched. So this is massive news. They've come back and they've put a statement out saying that they've now got photos of, the White House and the Pentagon. That itself is of no strategic use. It's just bragging rights, isn't it? But it basically means that we've now got the same battlefield visibility that our enemies do, which is a massive step up from where they were. We've also seen countless photos of endless North Koreans peeking their heads up with binoculars. Finally, that isn't the peak of their technology anymore. They've got eyes in the space. I've seen some commentators sort of saying that, oh, this is the first sort of show of benefit since Kim Jong-un went to Russia to meet Putin, where they agreed to swap ammunition for rocket know-how. But realistically, this is too soon for that to really show benefit. This is independent technology. This, I dare say, in the next year or so, we will see some either missile or space rocket launch that does have Russian know-how and advice behind it. But this isn't it. This is all North Korea doing it themselves.
Yeah.
So obviously, this is a big point of pride for North Korea at the moment. And obviously, straight away, they've been attacked by the United States, who have condemned the launch. And then, a few days ago, America have helped South Korea launch their own spy satellite from American territory. So this is complete hypocrisy. It's like you can't condemn one side for doing something and then help the other side do it. And of course, it's not about spy satellites. It's the same thing that the sort of space race was about. It was never about putting rockets in space. If a rocket can go in space, it can go anywhere. And if it can carry a capsule or a satellite, it can carry a warhead. That's what missile technology has always been the sort of driving factor towards carrying a military payload.
Yeah.
So obviously this is a big step for North Korea, and I can imagine that the next one will be even more. I think they already do have satellite up already, don't they? But it's not a spy satellite; it just plays music. I can't remember. I think it's either
North Korean one.
Where Are You, Dear General?
Oh, what? Wait, so
their first satellite that they sent to space, all it does is plays a little jingle. That I think it's Where Are You, Dear General? It's just sort of show that they can do it.
Right. I didn't know that had happened. That's great to know. Yes.
This is about 10 years ago. I don't even know if the actual satellite is still in orbit. That was
still in orbit or not? Yeah.
I think that was when Kim Jong-un first came in.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever heard or seen clips that particular song, "Where Are You, Dear General." North Korea, like a lot of old Eastern Bloc countries, there used to be a routine of when you start work in the morning, your workplace would have sort of an exercise routine before starting work, and they'd be playing music and inspirational tunes to sort of get you ready for the day and get you fit and healthy. North Korea's version of that is, whilst they're doing exercising, at 6 a.m, they play the song "Where Are You, Dear General" throughout the city of Pyongyang, and the speakers are ever so slightly busted. And if you ever hear it, especially or see the videos of it on a misty, foggy morning in North Korea, it does look a little bit like Silent Hill. I'm not going to lie. Like the music's got a bit of a theremin sort of noise to it. I'm not sure how happy I'd be to wake up to that at 6 a.m, but.
Should we take a look? Let's play a little bit of "Where Are You, Dear General." That is special. That's very special. Okay, yeah. So that song is being played throughout. Sorry, by the satellite that might still be playing by the satellite that could still be flying around
Through
in space.
space.
Brilliant. I mean, it's a very space-sounding song. Okay, cool.
Well, for anything played on the theremin is space sounding.
True. Yeah, like you said, though, this is not because of the meeting that they had a month ago. It's not like they built a satellite with Russian technology in 4 weeks. No, I don't think it's happening.
This is homegrown North Korean technology. So obviously, it would be a source of pride for them. And obviously, I imagine in the coming sort of years, we'll see that Russian technology come through as well.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I'll go to the next story then. So my next story is from South Africa, and it's regarding what's called the Rand manipulation scandal. So we have a bunch of banks, international banks and domestic banks in South Africa, who basically got caught colluding on currency, on the currency price and how much they would charge for these big currency services. So they would offer a set. They colluded to sort of set how much they charge between each other, big institutions, at a set rate, and then would drop their rates when a big client came through. So like a mining company would come through. So basically then manipulating the price of exchange for services and effectively the rand too. But it's a very big deal because basically from 2007 to 2013, this happened. So for a long period of time, and involved the Reserve Bank, the National. Sorry, 1 second. British Standard Chartered Bank, and a whole bunch of other financial institutions. And the fine was tiny. So like Standard Chartered from London was fined like 43 million rand. So that's like a very small amount of money. It's not a lot of money. It's like, someone's house, a good small mansion is 10 million rand. So, it's a tiny amount of money for Standard Chartered to pay.
Right.
And effectively, it just shows like just a huge amount of corruption. So there was a number big thrown around that there was R1 trillion a day being lost, but effectively, you just saw this level of private or business corruption, theft, on a huge scale, where they were just stealing millions and millions and millions of rand every day from these big exchanges by colluding over their prices. So in capitalism, people are supposed to compete. And that's how you get, you lower the cost or you increase the services. You get better services or lower costs because people having to compete and beat each other. These big banks just went, no, we'll just have a deal, and this will be the general price, and we'll give each other contracts. We'll rotate them around, and kept the price artificially high, basically, for the services and for the exchange rate. So, people talk about corruption generally being a government problem, being an ANC problem. And the private sector never being involved. The big banks, generally white-owned institutions, are never sort of cast into the same light. Private sector corruption is not given the same attention. And then also, corruption by the government is always given this cost. It costs the country so much money, which it does, of course. But here we're seeing the private sector, who's supposed to be the savvy businessmen who are good at keeping things efficient and running things well. Just lining their pockets and taking, the stolen wages of the miners already stolen, but further scalping off a few billion, a few trillion here for themselves. So just a small story just to sort of cast our lens a bit further across the world, and this is the same place we tend to look.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I do think we are long overdue a big exploratory episode looking at sort of South African politics. It's one that I think a lot of people sort of overlook. There are so many sort of parties in South Africa that do have quite a vocal presence, like the Economic Freedom Fighters, who obviously they're not in government, but they are represented in Parliament. But they're Marxist-Leninists, aren't they? Obviously, the ANC, who are some sort of flavour of left-wing, social democratic to liberal to. I've got a revolutionary past, but are so corrupt by all measures. Then you've obviously got the South African Communist Party who prop them up, as well as the National Congress, the Trade Union Congress.
Trade Unions Congress, yeah. Because Congress of Trade Unions, yeah. No, you're right. We are due, actually, next year is an election year in South Africa. So we will have to do a big episode on that. And well, it's a big election year. I think about 5 different countries.
It's a big election year in general. We've got America, we've got Venezuela, South Africa, Russia.
The UK. Russia.
Yeah, UK. Forgot about the UK.
And South Africa too. It's a very big election year next year. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
We're not going to be able to go into the full depth of it now. But yeah, the ANC is projected to, from at least 3 or 4 or 5 different good polls, will be below 50% for the first time since 1994. So since the first time since the end of apartheid. With the EFF, who self-described themselves as a Marxist, Leninist, Faninist party, very radical, openly Marxist Leninists, call themselves Marxists. At least the leader does. And they currently have seats in parliament, like you said, but they are tipped to potentially take about 20% of the vote, which would, depending on how the older, proper social democratic, more right-wing Democratic Alliance, more sort of Western-leaning party, depending on how they do, would either bring the EFF into the second biggest party, still behind the ANC, and then the potential for coalition is huge. There's a huge discussion over what's going to happen. But yeah, 5. Yeah. They said the election might be in May, so that we'll have to sort of do something in advance of that. But that'll be a very interesting election. Yeah. Extremely interesting. Yeah.
I see. That's always one thing that really worries me whenever with these sort of parliamentary systems, whenever they offer the really radical left-wing party into a coalition. As soon as you're in a coalition, you can't do anything that you want because you're not the primary ruler, but you get used as a human shield for when anything goes bad. And it sort of sours the public's taste against you because you didn't get anything that you wanted done or promised that you'd do. Everyone thinks, well, you had your chance. And it's like, well, we didn't really have a chance. We're in a coalition with a group of corrupt parties.
Yeah, it's certainly it's a difficult question for any parties going into coalitions. What do you sacrifice and what do you get out of it? So you get government, but it's not the government that you want, and you sacrifice your values. So therefore, the people that voted for you didn't get what they wanted, so they lose trust in you. So it's a risky business. But then power means that you can implement things, which you can look bigger, you can raise your profile. Yeah, there's a lot of debate around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it just shows, as it always does, sort of the limits of parliamentary politics. It's like the great quote, like Harpel Bra would always say to us, even if Karl Marx was resurrected and came back as the leader of the Labour Party, you can't turn it anything other than a bourgeois party. Because that is the establishment.
Yeah. There's some great examples of that. I mean, also of the proof of, or the farcity, the falseness of bourgeois and bourgeois democracy. We can go into. I think we should go into some time. Of course, Allende recently in Greece with the Troika and the EU bailouts. There's loads of examples of it. We can always go into it. Bernie Sanders, Corbyn. There's loads of other examples of this kind of stuff. Of people trying to change the machine, but then at the end you just find there's just someone with a hammer waiting at the door, sort of telling you that that's the end. Yeah. There's no more. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so South Africa for another future episode. What do you want to discuss next?
So my last point that I've got up here, one that's a little bit closer to home. So last week there was demonstrations, as there have been every day since the flare-up in Palestine and Gaza. There's been demonstrations every day in the UK, in every major city. Last week in London, there was a major demonstration, and one of our party comrades, Ranjit Brar, was arrested on the side of the road for selling a book. So I've actually got the book here. The police accused him, he's charged with inciting racial hatred. So the police came over, they said that our crime lab investigated this book. I can only sort of picture what that was, with a little pop-up tent with a bunch of men in white lab coats, with little pets of liquid, just shaking it. It's come up purple for racial hatred. And he was arrested along with I think there was 4 members in total who were arrested. So this is the book. It was actually this cover that was the
That cover.
charge.
That was the charge.
So
right.
he was arrested for criticizing Israel in the streets.
Yes.
So if anyone wants to buy this book, this is available on CPGBML website. It is a very good book. We highly suggest that you do.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show that the limits, the length of power that Israel control over our police system. That this is political policing.
Yes. Yes. I mean, just to clarify, so that they said inciting racial hatred, but yeah, if you look, the book itself is actually is an anti-racist book. It's saying that Zionism is racist. It's a racist ideology.
It's literally the subtitle of it, a racist anti-Semite reactionary tool of imperialism. It is a book.
Right.
It's an anti-racist
It is an
book.
anti-racist book, exactly. Right. So yeah, like you said, it's just insane. I mean, I've seen the video myself where the copper says, "Our crime lab has assessed this book and has determined that this literature is hate speech and or no, it doesn't even say that. It's determined it's hate speech. Is that what he says? I can't remember exactly. But yeah, the
Racial
idea
hatred.
that racial hatred, inciting racial hatred. So this
Yeah.
book, the lab has assessed it, like you said. Just they've put a blue light to it. They've done some forensics and determined that it's racist because it has a swastika on it. Even though that's not exactly a proper swastika, but it's not. But it's besides the point. I mean, I'm sure you can buy books with swastikas on them explaining various historical facts. It's not like, I think you'd have to analyze the book. Go, is this a Nazi book? No.
Yeah, what they're doing is they are using the definition of anti-Semitism as defined by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Now, if you remember back to Corbyn, that was the push of
any criticism
the
of Israel.
Media saying, "Do you recognise this organisation's definition of anti-Semitism?" And he would always say no. And a lot of people who don't know about it would say, "Oh, it's disgusting that. Why can't I just accept that things are anti-Semitic?" When you actually read these points of what they class as anti-Semitic, is bullshit. Half it isn't about Jews; it's about Israel. So the last 2 points here that I'm just going to read. So these are their definitions of anti-Semitism. Drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis, and holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the State of Israel. So it's that second to last one, drawing comparisons between Israeli policy and that of the Nazis. If you do that, you're an anti-Semite.
According to this definition.
Well, you do. That is literally what the State of Israel have been doing. It's been as a well-known criticism that the only thing that the Zionists really learned from the Nazis is how to replicate their behavior. So if you don't want to be compared to Nazis, don't put people in concentration camps. Don't
make an ethno-state. Yeah, exactly.
Don't bring in policies of apartheid through an entire country, separating people dependent on race and religion.
Right. Yeah, entirely.
So that'll be what the police were referencing when they arrested him. That's because obviously the book has a swastika inside the Star of David.
Right.
So absolutely ridiculous.
I'm curious to see on whether at what point that became British law, like British interpretation.
It isn't British law at all.
Right.
That's what this is, political policing. If we were having the same protest against Saudi Arabia, showing the Crown Prince beheading a journalist on the front of a magazine, we wouldn't be treated the same way.
Right.
Since when has it become that isn't that the nature of sort of Britishness being able to protest against that?
Well, exactly. I mean, we just talked about.
I think the opposite actually said there's limits towards freedom of speech.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So we talked about bourgeois democracy earlier, and obviously this is like, where's the freedom of speech? I mean, also, where's the crowd? Where's the where are the liberals now? I defend your right to say. I do not agree with what you say, but I defend to the death your right to say it.
Yeah.
Where are these people now? Where are all these classical liberals that say these things in Parliament, or at least uphold them behind closed doors or at university, or whatever. They pick and choose. They pick and choose. Yeah.
It made me laugh that 2 days after this massive pro-Palestine protest, the Israelis and the pro-Israelis had their first protest in the UK, and by all accounts, it was quite big, and it just surprised me. The
March Against Anti-Semitism, as they labelled it. Right?
Yes, that's what they called it.
Right.
But it was a pro-Israel protest, really, wasn't it? And it was led by Boris Johnson. Tommy Robinson came and was arrested because he was told not to come.
Yeah.
It just shows that.
Yeah. So this one
when these are the big names that turn up to your protest, it's not a good sign. Like, how can you say that you're the goodies when Tommy Robinson's trying to get in?
Yes. No, that they had to kick him out for. Yeah, he was very bad with the PR. But I mean, Tommy Robinson and the EDL and that group of that flavor of the right wing have always been very big fans of Israel and have been caught marching in various marches with Israeli with Zionist fanatics. We actually talked about this in a Corbyn episode a while ago. These individuals,
it's not because of any great love for Judaism or Jews. No, it's because it's either because they hate Muslims.
And it's partly because they're like, yes, have a homeland, go, leave the UK, go to your homeland. So it's about kicking out.
These are literally the people.
Very anti-Semitic.
These are literally the people who had been marching with Oswald Mosley in the 40s against Jews, and now they're marching with Zionists against Islam.
Yes, so the EDL or far right characters believe in an ethno-state, an English ethno-state. The Israelis believe in their idea of an ethno-state too. So they're very much in line in that sense. And yes, and they both hate Muslims. That's the central bridge.
That's the thing that unites them, really.
Yes,
I think it's interesting when you see some of the loyalists in Northern Ireland, where some of their flags that they put up, where you'll see them put up the St. George, a Nazi flag underneath it, and then an Israeli flag underneath that. And then sometimes an American Confederate flag.
Just rogues gallery.
None of these people got on with each other.
What are your ideas? I don't know.
I know you hate somebody. I'm just not sure who.
Well, it was kind of like the Hong Kong protest when you had you had a Trump flag, a South Vietnamese flag, you had just whatever flag, Tibetan flag, whatever, just anything you want.
Because South Vietnamese flag, what does that even represent? We demand to be a French colony again.
Before we get into
Hong Kong was never even French.
Right. But well, this is about freedom of speech. What we're talking about here, right? And the fact that having this particular view of Israel is you can get punished for it, basically, for criticizing Israel, for calling out the war crimes. You're going to get criticized. Musk. So I'm going to play a little thing here from Musk. So Elon Musk also had his own little moment. He was accused of being anti-Semitic maybe the week before last, and then he went to Israel and saw stuff and said some stuff that was very much in favor of the Israeli view of this conflict right now. And then he had this interview. So I'm just going to play this. I don't know if you'll hear this, Chris, but I'm going to play it and then we'll fix the audio later.
I hope they stop. You hope don't advertise.
You don't want them to advertise?
No.
What do you mean?
If somebody's going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go f yourself.
But
go f yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is. Hey, Bob, if you're in the audience.
well, let me ask you then.
That's how I feel. Don't advertise.
Right. So that's what he said. And any idea who Bob is, Chris?
No, Bob.
Bob who?
No.
No, you don't know. Okay. So no, if you're watching this or listening to this, send in the comments. I don't know who the hell Bob is. I didn't research that part yet. So we'll find out who Bob is. That's apparently the Lord of advertising that Elon Musk is somewhat directing his comments at. But but it's an interesting point that a lot of advertisers, Disney and IBM, HBO,
Bob Iger.
Bob who?
Bob Iger, managing director of Disney. That was the first one that came to my mind. In terms of advertisers, big company, maybe.
And they did pull up. Disney to drop the advertising. So yeah, they're talking about X. So these big companies, including Disney, dropped advertising on X/Twitter, and because of what Musk had said regarding anti-Semitism and the allegations of anti-Semitism, whatever. But it shows you, even big old Musk, the richest man in the world, who's got the space company and the car company, and he's a genius. He even is feeling the pressure.
He's a stupid man's idea of what a smart man is. Like, he is one of the worst businessmen in the entire world. I think he's actually just won a record for the most wealth lost in the shortest period of time.
I think it's Twitter, right?
Yeah, it's just mad. Obviously, I think we've touched on this a little bit when he bought Twitter. Obviously, he didn't want to buy Twitter. He said that he was going to, and then tried to back out of it, and then Twitter threatened to sue him for backing out, so he had to. And then he realised afterwards that it doesn't make any money, and there was a load of decisions that got everyone pissed off and left. And just the idea that this man who has built his entire persona around sitting on money is pretending that he doesn't care about money. It's like, it's like if it wasn't for money, you wouldn't have a personality. That's literally the only reason why we know you.
Right. I mean, there is something to talk about in terms of the difference between political discussion and the amount of free speech, quote unquote, free speech on X versus elsewhere. I mean, there's this character called Jackson Hinkle. You might have heard of him. Somewhat sort of calls himself a Marxist-Leninist. Maybe he is. Maybe he's just there for the clicks. I don't know. Nonetheless, quite openly anti-imperialist, sort of, at least on some issues, open anti-imperialist views. Managed to get to being the most viral account on X, which is almost unheard of for someone who's maybe a communist. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I always think Jackson sort of managed to. He's dug out a niche and he's figured out how to make the algorithm work for him. He's great at sort of roweling people up, isn't he? Obviously when we first sort of used to travel in the sort of similar online circles, he was just a Marxist-Leninist, and since then he's given himself a Fox News haircut and a suit, calls himself a MAGA communist, and a lot of it seems to be towards aiming himself more at a right-wing audience and trying to pull them towards I wouldn't even say an anti-imperialist standpoint, but definitely a non-interventionist standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, it is certainly interesting that did happen, that he managed to get that much interest and that much traction, so that people at least were able to see him, that much visibility. But I still think that the fact that
with him and a few others like him, and I will sort of put him in the sort of same category of someone like Elon Musk in this, of these people who have big platforms, are never out of the limelight, but are constantly pretending that they're being silenced and cancelled. I hate it so much. Like, they're trying to cancel me. It's like, I hadn't even heard them, whoever they are. I've just heard you on your platform to millions of people saying that you're being cancelled. You are not cancelled. You're not being silenced. In fact, you're louder than ever.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, okay. I think the last thing that I've got discussed is Kissinger. Is there anything you want to go into before we go into Kissinger, the dessert?
No, I think Kissinger is a good sort of place to to go to.
Sure. So, as anyone who's watching this or listening to this probably already knows, Henry Kissinger is dead. He's 100 years old, or was 100 years old. I mean, I think that we can talk a lot about this. He had a lot of influence in Israel, Gaza / Egypt war back in the day.
China,
Laos, China, Angola, Soviet Union, South America, even Rhodesia / Zimbabwe, and of course, like I said, China. The guy was, he was a political giant. There's a lot of other adjectives. People are like, genius and a great statesman and realpolitik and all of this stuff. So we can go into all of this. The first thing I want to say is he actually, in my opinion, epitomizes this idea of a deep state, of someone who's always just in the machine and never leaves, and is maybe elected, maybe never elected. In this case, I don't think he ever was elected. No, he was never elected. He never ran for office. Yet was a part of the state apparatus of the USA for his
the man who
entire
was always on
life.
the edge frame of every photograph, but you know that this is where the power is. Whoever's in power is asking him, what should we do?
Right.
And it was his ideas through Nixon, through Gerald Ford. I think even Trump
Ford Nixon,
toted around with him, didn't
he? Yeah. So what's like his, obviously his most prominent thing is obviously Vietnam, Cambodia, China. Those are the big three, I would say, and then a bit of detente with Russia, with Soviet Union. But so just to give you an idea of how much of an operator, like a political operator, internal political operator, he was on LBJ's national advisory sort of security top brass, and so he knew that the negotiations, the peace negotiations, the first proper round of peace negotiations around 1968 were happening with North Vietnam. Okay, and he informed. I've seen this reported at two different places. He's the one who told Nixon's team and also Goldberg, who's the alternative Democrat candidate, about the negotiations, and then scuttled those negotiations. So basically told Nixon's team to communicate with the diplomat from the South, actually, the South Vietnamese, and told the South Vietnamese diplomat to not attend, or the South Vietnamese leader to basically boycott the negotiations, therefore collapsing the peace talks, therefore just sinking LBJ. So he fed that information and he processed that so that he could then jump onto Nixon's team after LBJ was gone. Because he saw LBJ was, depressed, and there's people chanting his name in the streets and all of the stuff from 1968. So he was ready to work with Nixon, realize, okay, this ship is sinking, jump ship, and also had the other ship too. Goldberg was also ready. He was ready to help them too. And even Rockefeller had a short stint as a candidate too. But that just shows you that he literally had no values. He just stood for power and being in power and standing for the U.S. empire and just representing.
He was a strategist, wasn't he? So this is the man. Yeah. Obviously, when America wants to bomb a country, a specific country, at least this was the way before the Patriot Act, which allowed you to sort of pick where and when you're going to bomb someone, depending on who you can accuse of being terrorists. And we'd have to get an act of Congress to agree and to allocate funds for that military campaign in said country. They had that for Vietnam. They did not have that for Laos and Cambodia. It was Kissinger's idea and planning to stretch the bombing campaign to these countries that when America was not at war with and didn't know about, and the lengths that they went to cover this up. So bombing crews would get in their fighters, get in their bombers, ready to leave, and then just about when they were ready to close their cockpit, it would be given new orders on paper. These are our new bombing coordinates. And they wouldn't even know that they're not bombing within Vietnam anymore, that they're now bombing within Cambodia and Laos.
Yes.
And if you see, if anyone's watched any sort of documentary on these two countries now, the mass amount of humanitarian efforts that have gone into collecting unexploded ordnance, huge amounts of death that happened in these countries that were not at war with America. And America, on paper, was not at war with. Obviously, because of the bombing in Cambodia, this is literally the crux of why we ended up with Pol Pot, who was only able to accumulate that much power because of the bombing on his country, on Cambodia, by Kissinger and Nixon.
Yes.
And obviously, what we all know what him and the Khmer Rouge did, where they managed to hijack a communist party and basically pull everyone out of the cities into the countryside and killed like a third of the country. I've heard some people even try and justify this, and they say that, well, because the country was so badly hit, the agriculture was damaged, so you needed to feed your country. So, okay, that does excuse beefing up rice production. That doesn't excuse killing a third of your country and everyone who wears glasses and basically turning the cities into the deserted prison camps.
Yeah.
There's no Marxist excuse for Pol Pot.
Yeah, no, there isn't. Yeah. I mean, also to clarify on that point, Pol Pot himself, I don't think he was ever ideologically bound to any of the sort of ideologies of the Cold War. He was someone opportunist, perhaps, who called himself a revolutionary communist leader, a national liberation leader. And then once his funding had changed, or once he couldn't get support, he even got support from the U.S. From the CIA to fight the Vietnamese once the Vietnamese came in. But just to come back to
he was toppled by a communist country.
by the Vietnamese, later. But yeah, I mean, I haven't been to Cambodia yet. I mean, I'm in Vietnam right now, but I've only seen actually there's a place you can go just north of Ho Chi Minh, or Saigon, if you will, where there's some of the old tunnels, the underground tunnels that were there during the war, and you can still see a line of craters from carpet bombing, and you just have to sort of, I don't know, visualize it. Just huge craters. I mean, you could park a car in this thing. It's a massive, deep crater, like World War I style craters, deep in the jungle, and they're just lines of them. So you really talk about a policy of trying to carpet bomb the jungle, trying to blow up the jungle, trying to actually destroy whole swathes of just surface. So there was, yes, they might have had some intel and maybe a satellite image and maybe a picture of a road from the planes that flew over, but the targeting, the way they attack these things is just complete devastation, just kilometers and kilometers. But which now, when we have this Gaza war going on, you're sort of thinking, well, I guess this was maybe the model for where you can commit atrocities, because the number of how many civilians died, it's, you could say 50,000, you could say 100,000. No one actually knows how many civilians were killed by this secret illegal bombing, which Kissinger did and organized with Nixon. But also in Hanoi, I mean, Nick Kissinger was there too when they bombed and tried to bomb them to the negotiation table in Hanoi, in the city. Yeah. So this was a city full of civilians. So that policy of American policy of being able to bomb on that scale and not have to deal with crimes or have to make it be seen as being an atrocity, like that really has a very close link with Vietnam and Kissinger. So right now, with the Israelis doing what they're doing in Gaza, the Americans got away with this 50 years ago on a much bigger scale. But that was the precedent. It was Kissinger's thing.
Yeah, Kissinger, exactly. I was going to say, we're seeing in Gaza now where the Israelis are giving evacuation orders, everyone go to the south, and then bombing the south. Kissinger is very much the godfather of this sort of war crime. And this is what was interesting, where it's the one occasion that's actually made me side with Facebook leftists over, sadly, under the Chinese Communist Party, is the reaction where Facebook communists are all agreeing that Kissinger is a war criminal. Unfortunately, China have come out in praise of him and saying, how he brought the United States and China together to the table, like what you were saying, realpolitik. But obviously, this isn't in the frame of them exploiting the Sino-Soviet split, which is something that they completely jumped into. Obviously, the Sino-Soviet split was initially caused by Khrushchev revisionism and China's refusal to what they sort of class as de-Stalinize and move towards a central democratic, effectively the abandonment of socialism that the Soviet Union started after 1953, where China didn't kowtow to that, but America still jumped into that opportunity to widen that divide. If it wasn't for Kissinger, I dare say that it wouldn't have gone to the extent that it did.
Yeah. No, I think that in terms of the defeat of the Soviet Union, effectively, it started actually with that division that was already there, with the Chinese and the Soviets, and then Nixon and Kissinger, dividing it further. Mao accepted, this opening up, this economic opportunity, this new peace and whatnot. So I guess you could say perhaps he fell for it too. I don't know, but nonetheless, that was his policy. He accepted it. And he said, okay, well, let's open up. Let's have some peace. From the Kissinger side, he was obviously trying to leverage the backers of North Vietnam, as well as thinking about the grand Cold War politics. But that split then between the Soviet Union and China widened, and that's where you got these bizarre situations in Cambodia, where you had the Chinese backing Pol Pot with the Americans against the Vietnamese who were backed by the Soviet Union, and all fighting in Cambodia. And then even worse, I mean, we'll get into this in a moment, Angola also had the same scenario. Where
I was just going to say Angola, where the Americans were supporting the Maoists against the Marxist-Leninists who were being supported by the Soviet Union and Cuba.
Right, Cuba. Yeah, exactly, right. So the MPLA, who effectively won the war against the Portuguese in 1975. 1976, they're fighting off a group called the FNLA, if I'm not mistaken, who were from the Congo, backed by the Chinese. And I don't know what the Americans backed them, but I know that the Chinese were backing one set of Marxist liberation struggle, and the main one was in the capital, which was backed by the Soviet Union. Then the white apartheid forces, apartheid army came up through the south, and it was when the Cubans intervened that stopped them. Yeah. But this all stems from the same...
back in them. In fact, I was actually just playing, funny enough, one of the Call of Duty games this week where you actually play as the CIA fights on behalf of the Maoists in that war.
What's his name? I've forgotten his name. UNITA rebel. Anyway, but so this all stems from that. That was Kissinger's, probably his greatest thing was to divide further the Chinese and Soviets to the point, when things started getting really bad in the Soviet Union and their form of revisionism, disintegrated economic problems.
And then it spread throughout the entire Warsaw Pact, where you have Enver Hoxha, who at one point was a Maoist condemning the Soviet Union. It just split the entire movement down the middle, didn't it? That's why you only need to look through in the UK alone, where we had the CPGB, and by the time of 1990 coming around, 30, 40 parties are in every acronym thrown in just alphabet soup: Revolutionary Communist Party, Revolutionary Marxist Party. Half of them would be 12 guys running around the estate with Mao's little red book. You still get those sort of lunatics.
Remember that was a global effect, because you also had that with you had the groups who would meet in the US and be chanting at each other. Like one side would be chanting Ho Ho Chi Minh, other would be chanting Mao 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 Zedong, and this kind of division. It ruined the communist movement. That really did globally. We haven't recovered yet. So if you're an American imperialist, then in this sense you could say Kissinger, this was his greatest feat.
This was his legacy.
Yeah, and only now with the realignment of China and Russia in the sort of last, since 2011 perhaps, are we seeing the reversal of that. And then of course Brzezinski, which is Kissinger's great rival as a strategist, would say that this is the greatest threat, the Eurasian realignment. But without going back into that kind of stuff, because we've discussed it many times, the other sort of thing to say, apart from the peace and opening up to China, Kissinger was actually quite a loser. He lost in many of these things. The Americans walked away as losers in many of these exchanges. So Vietnam, apart from actually losing in 1975 and 73, having to make a peace deal, they also lost twice. So, Kissinger and Nixon decided to scuttle the 1968 peace deal to try and make another peace deal, which ended up being pretty much the same peace deal, which ended up in them losing the war effectively anyway, and sacrificing American soldiers for the sake of honor. So there's at least 2 or 3 years of American lives in that war, if you only care about American lives, that is, that didn't need to be sacrificed. They could have easily had the deal in 68, 69. Then they would have had the inevitable result in 71. So it could have been 2 years or 3 years sooner, and saved all of the bloodshed and the unnecessary bombing of Cambodia too, and the unnecessary creation of the conditions of Khmer Rouge. But so he lost in that sense. But also in, he got. There's a picture I had earlier of him on Time magazine where he's got a dove, a white dove, like a magician pulling a dove out of a hat, and it's on the cover of Times. He goes, "Wow, the great Kissinger, how does he do it?" And it's 1970 something, 1973, 74, about the time that he won the Nobel Peace Prize. Just if you didn't know that, Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize for his peace deal in 1973. The Vietnamese counterpart rejected. But anyway, there's a picture of him throwing this bird, and all the you've got the Egyptian leader, I think Sadat, and Brezhnev is there, and all they're watching that. But really, the man was not a man of peace, and he lost all of those things. So, like I just said, Vietnam. Yeah. Angola too was a complete disaster, and they were defeated. He also said some terrible stuff regarding Zimbabwe. Supporting the whites. He said he once went and visited Rhodesia in South Africa, and then he basically said the whites are there to stay. And made really bad calculations in that sense too. What's interesting about Kenny is it's not popular in Taiwan.
For American, he's very much sort of set the course for American foreign policy to this day. And it's interesting to say being such a loser, because really America's been really 5 major wars since World War II. That being Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War 1, Gulf War 2, and Afghanistan. Out of all those, you can really only count Gulf War 1 as a success.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, militarily, Gulf War 2, but in terms of like a decent result, for anyone.
It's kind of a militarily, in terms of if you stop at toppling Saddam, then but the fact they had to leave because Islamic terrorism had become that fucking rife and ended with ISIS, then then it's hardly a victory. America are and Kissinger's sort of ideology and legacy is one of loss. I think it is a loser ideology.
Yeah. It's just on the point you mentioned about obviously the Chinese official, Xi as well, Xi Jinping himself, saying, friend of China, I will always be remembered as a friend of China. I think you have to remember that right now, at least when he said that, or he just said that a few days ago, but he met with Xi a few months ago too. I think it was June. Kissinger has became a symbol of a certain era of American politics. So particularly for China, it was peace, detente, economic cooperation, and whatnot. So as an individual, I don't think even that doesn't particularly matter. They're just using him as a pillar, as a sign of a certain time politically. I don't think they really care about, they're not really honoring his legacy in other regards. But it's just,
they're not. They're not thinking any
signaling to the American people.
Further past sort of Deng Xiaoping, are they?
Yeah. What's that? Sorry.
So they're not really thinking any further past Deng Xiaoping when thinking of that. They are thinking of the economic opening up and Chinese prosperity.
Yeah, that's it. And it's just using him as a symbol to say, like, why don't we go back to relations where we're not, trying to spy on each other and kill each other and do all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the same, because that's also why Hillary Clinton, would take anyone would take pictures with Kissinger in the last 30 years, just to sort of say, he's a symbol of detente, he's a symbol of strategic armamentarium talks, he's a symbol of this, a symbol of American statesmanship. Which apparently the elites thought that just having detente with the Soviet Union and just having opening up with China was enough. The Cambodia and Vietnam stuff we could just brush that aside, and the Angola stuff and the South America stuff. But anyway, any final thoughts on Kissinger?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered quite a bit. Obviously, depending on what sort of happens in the next week, we'll see how the format sort of goes, whether we carry on with this or.
Yes.
Not that it's been a slow week, but we don't really want to carry on when there's so much of the news gets sort of taken up by lengthy wars. We don't really want to repeat the same war update.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I think, how about this? We'll put any bets on who will most likely pass away before the end of the year, or maybe just next year. We could do next year. Obviously, Jimmy Carter is the first one that comes to mind.
Jimmy, we're saying that when Kissinger died, on the same day, you had Alistair Darling, who was Tony Blair's advisor,
right.
The guy from the Pogues. They all died on the same day.
The guy from the what, sorry?
The Pogues.
The Pogues.
Christmas in New York. Fairy Tale in New York.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay. Right.
Yeah, they all died on the same day. Just one after the other. Oh.
Alistair Darling died. Yeah, well, that's. I feel sorry for Alistair Darling. His death was completely overshadowed by another war criminal. So.
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually the worst. Yeah, be a war criminal and don't even be remembered for anything. Don't even get your war criminal's farewell. Shame. Poor war criminal. But anyway, okay, yeah. So we'll be back next week with something. It'll be either like this format, which is just a couple of things, or a special on something particular. But we'll see how the week goes. Thank you very much for watching.
Thank you very much.